retains that, but it looks more helmet-like.
Yes.
We call the engineer an elephantine engineer because of the trunk. It's the suit that the engineers wear in order to be able to travel in space. And when they're not in that, they're wearing what we call a pressure suit. So the design of the engineer was driven from that perspective, that actually the big discovery is that this isn't a creature in its own right. This is a suit. This is worn by another being.
I think Ridley found it more interesting if they were our creators, that he kept quoting the Bible passage, and God created man in his own image.
I thought if you're going to be biblical about it, then is a religion race memory? Was there really God? Was there the Son of God? Or were there visitations of superior beings?
Warrior priests or something.
Exactly right. And here is something slightly ominous, which is a serious pair of high-tech shoes, boots.
We got Neville Page involved. Neville specializes in creature design, and we introduced him to the physical anatomy that was a brief from Ridley that it shouldn't be like a bodybuilder musculature. It should be like classical statuary. When you look at them, they're very much more compact and less overdeveloped, but exaggerated in every detail. And so we try to express those and overlay them with this classical veneer to make them godlike.
I spent a lot of time developing the ultimate head, which was classical art driven. We kept looking at Da Vinci's work for that bulky, husky body, the strong nose, the small lips. It was like the names thrown out were David, the David sculpture, the Statue of Liberty, and Elvis Presley. And when you hear that as a brief, you're like, what the hell am I gonna do? I understood, though, as you look at those three images, you go, oh, I get it. It's that specific mouth, that nose, and these eyes.
He wanted them to be, in a strange sort of way, beautiful and not frightening. Frightening comes with attitude.
The first camera test with the engineer, he scared the people walking around, not because he did anything. It was that unsettling because you did feel the effect we were going for in creating the design of those engineers manifested itself in reality, which is, it was deeply unsettling to see something that was kind of superhuman, kind of vacant in the eyes, blackened eyes, looking down at you and looking kind of upset at you. The way in which it felt like a kind of angry kind of father or angry parent was troubling. And it was, a lit room. There was nothing, he wasn't doing anything fancy. It was just scary. All the actors got to experience that, and they got to interact with an actor and have dialogue with those characters, and not just talk to some blank screen.
I really like that it's really kind of attractive the same way, because they're beautiful. You want to go closer, you want to touch them in a way. You want to kind of be embraced by them. And that makes it much more interesting.
I don't like to repeat myself. So you're constantly evolving with these guys who are really great creators in their own right. So frequently we'll just talk or scribble saying no, like this or like that. We've now got such a marvelous wealth of encyclopedic wealth of information on any laptop. Like we designed a thing, and this is called the trilobite, by just going into deep sea things and looking at things which are marvelous details. God's the best designer in the world. You can't do better than God.
I think, Carlos Fuentes, Neville Page, and Neil Scanlon's team did a good job of trying to take this monumental task of at least being on the same level as Alien, which was, almost impossible.
Can I do a combination of the veins plus this? Because this is changing cranium.
Holloway is infected. He then impregnates Shaw, and from that, Shaw then gives birth, in a sense, to what we call the Medpod creature, which is extracted through from her stomach. That then grows into the trilobite. Also happening almost in tangent with that is Fifield, and Fifield's been exposed to the gloop, and so he begins to go through a sort of transformation independent of that, and becomes what we call the Fifield creature. And that ultimately the engineer crossed with the trilobite gives us what we call the Deacon, and he is the penultimate, as far as the film is concerned, the penultimate combination of all of this.
The idea of biting the umbilical,
Yeah.
I think is too much.
I think it's, an interesting idea for the European version. The evolutions that emerge from them evolve to higher and higher forms, which you see illustrated here, eventually leading back to the original Giger alien. So we're basically attempting to deconstruct Giger's alien and show how it evolved from its humanoid hosts, both earthly humans and our space jockey engineer species.
I go, oh, we have to have the precursor to the facehugger that looks like this centipede thing that is a centipede of the facehugger with got like 100 fingers. And this thing just crawls around, and that's the thing that attacks the guy. It grabs him. It grabs his arm. Then we could have that cool 1970s science fiction astronaut, looking at his arm. This thing has grabbed his hand, and, that'd be cool, right? And I know Ridley's all about that. He gets that.
The Medpod creature was really a baby form. He's an embryotic form or a baby form of this. And Ivan Manzella did a number of sketches and designs in ZBrush. And we showed those to Ridley, and I think we got lucky. We showed Ridley something, and he said, yeah, that's great. And so we had that design quite early, and that gave us the blueprint for where we would go later. He just worked well as a design. The fact that the tentacles are fused initially, and that they split and then continue to split to create the tentacles later. This is Ivan. He's working on the Medpod creature, which is obviously taken out of shore in the Medpod sequence. We're inside a little room within a room, really, and this is our sort of fortress, because the work that goes on in here is the concept design for the creatures. We're working on designs here in the UK. Designs have been worked on in the States, and it sort of all comes together, and we get a sort of weekly visit from Ridley where we sit down at the table, Ridley with a sketch pad, and we show him sort of work in progress. He adds elements that he feels and points us in the right direction, and we carry on going.
There was one creature that Carlos and I were kind of batting back and forth to one another. When I was given Carlos's image to work with, Ridley said, just give me your own take on it. Give me what you think Alien should look like, the baby, as it was referred to. So I, if it's a verb, gigered the hell out of it and brought a punch that it's like, yeah, that really feels like Giger's aesthetic. And Ridley was like, no, that's not it at all. Man, we were all over the place on Fifield. I think I actually spent the most time on Fifield. Ridley wanted variations of a Carlos thing that he did, which was a baby face, and the baby face character that was Fifield was gonna have inverted legs and a bit of a tail. It was like a very, very quick morph from Fifield to this monster.
Oh, that one is still the best. Carlos's drawing.
That's Mark 1. That's the original.
That's the best. Yeah.
The concern was, for a lot of it, Ridley's feelings were that it looked too much like a goblin.
As soon as you get to that, it doesn't work.
Goblin.
It's got a goblin. And somehow it's a goblin.
Looks a bit like Gollum, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's better than Gollum, actually.
And then we took it more where Fifield would be infected, still humanoid. Limb length would grow, and we needed to keep some of his features, which, again, that's a real tough balance, because as soon as you start to morph it into a creature, they disappear. So we talked about the tattoo and making that tattoo, whether it be on the face or on his body, and having that become something that will allow us to basically see that it's still Fifield.
Martin, that we saw earlier, is working on further sort of Fifield designs, and again, back to Ridley on those, back to us, back to the sculpting process.
At this point, it was clear we're not trying to do Giger's aesthetic. We weren't going to do the facehugger, and we weren't going to do any kind of metaphor to the first film, but at the same time, this trilobite creature became like the uber metaphor of the facehugger in a way, because it's very tentacular. It's in the same way somewhat sexual, and quite honestly, On that one, when I was done with kind of the face of it, if it even has one, it had the most vulvas that I've ever put into a design. It was a celebration of vulvas, really, which seemed appropriate. It's just the way the organic mechanism works. The fact that it had 7 tentacles, that was a struggle for me quite a while because we didn't want to do just an octopus, and there was a few images at the very beginning where it looked just like an octopus. But in the end, it was all about one pose that I did to give it a sense of one, locomotion, and make it look like there was power and strength in these tentacles to actually lift it off of the ground. How powerful can we make this look? And between the combination of Weta's efforts and Alex Alvarez, I just looked at it and thought, this thing's pretty badass. The Deacon, the Ultramorph, I think really from the beginning, Carlos kind of nailed it.
There were a couple versions of the alien that the Xenomorph, the Ultramorph, whatever it became, it was straight out of one of Giger's paintings. I embellished a little couple things, but I kept it like as close to his stuff as I could. You have to. He invented the look.
Sometimes your first impressions are often the best. And I remember when we joined the project, there was a drawing in existence of a rather silvery metallic looking deacon, the deacon being the description for the point at the back of the head, lying in a pool of fluid. And it was quite impressionistic, but it was great. And I think we went down so many different alternatives. When it came to it, nothing was better than that one thing, that caught something.
95% of our efforts on a production are things that you never see because they're not correct. And that's where all these, not mistakes, but finding what does not work, those are stepping stones, building blocks to get to the right thing.
Alien, for so many visual people was like a landmark watershed thing. I mean, it reinvented the look of science fiction movies forever. And when you watch it and you're an artist or a visual person, the level of visual craft and of the articulation of what's going on in the frame and motion and light, it's so well done.
I got the feeling right away that I don't think Ridley Scott just wants to rehash the familiar territory. He wanted to capture the effect of the first Alien. He was going to take the same elements and present them in a new way.
The stylings that we were working on were reminiscent of the Nostromo and of a lot of the Alien 1 aesthetic, but at the same time, it just, covering a much broader palette of different kinds of things.
You can do very flashy hardware, which means nothing, but it's how do you apply that to the story and where does it fit into the whole so that you're creating a whole environment that's credible and entertaining.
I was cast to do development for the human technology. First thing I started on was the excavation. They had these excavation pods. They were kind of like submersibles. They're hovering around, and I assumed it was Mars, and they're digging. They shear off this cliff, and there are hieroglyphs. They approach Wayland to get funding. Wayland doesn't have an office like in an office building. So the first idea was that it was on this enormous habitat, like a huge space station. So they travel there in sort of a shuttle, and they land, and we developed this enormous biosphere kind of thing. It was a huge ring with farmland and lakes and things inside of it. And the idea was that Wayland is already he's basically developing the solar system.